Windy, what's the latest with Harden?
Yeah, I think the expectation is that he would opt out and become a free agent. That said, he hasn't done that yet. So he has until midnight to do that. And the thing about it is there isn't a huge market for James Harden. There's not 6 different teams or 4 different teams that have cap space and a need for a point guard. Houston is an option, but it doesn't seem like it's headed in that direction. I wouldn't rule it out. So the real question is, if he's back in Philadelphia, which is what the indications are, what is the contract? And one of the things he could do is pick up this option and then extend years onto it. And, Joel Embiid, congratulations to him. His Supermax kicks in this week. He gets a 40% raise off his salary from last season, which he's earned as the MVP.
Yeah.
That salary is very high. Tobias Harris is at $39 million. Tyrese Maxey is extension eligible this summer, and I would expect the 76ers to get something done. They got a lot of money on their books. So one of the things that the Sixers could do, and I will say a year ago, on June 29th, we weren't sure what was going to happen with James Harden. And on July 1st, James Harden emerged with Daryl Morey from their cocoon of negotiations with a very surprising contract where he took a pay cut on a short deal. Who's to say that there won't be a surprise contract negotiation here where he might opt into it and extend out up to 4 years? Or maybe he opts out and comes back with something else. To me, the drama isn't going to be in where James Harden is, unless we get a curveball that most people don't see. It's what's the terms of the contract, and what does that mean for the rest of the 76ers and their team going forward.
Okay. Well, Legs, should the 76ers even want Harden back?
Yes.
Yeah.
You see, I sound convincing, right?
Yeah,
it really was
very convincing. Yeah.
Here's why. Look, it's a necessary evil for them because of the position their team is in, right? And they're close. They're close. James Harden is a great regular season player. He is a spottily great postseason player. But there's a lot of nights that we know that he has struggled when they've needed him the most. None more than the end of the Boston series a year ago. Game 6, Game 7, and it's not all him. Embiid struggled as well. I understand that. But Harden has a track record of having some of these head-scratching type of moments in big spots. Having said all of that, when you're in the position you're in with the MVP of the league, with another emerging star in Tyrese Maxey, you've acquired James Harden, you gave up capital and assets to get him. When you've done all of that, James Harden to walk out the door with no compensation, you're not going to be as close as you were the day before he makes that decision. So you move forward with it. You give him the offer that it's going to take. I'm not saying you give him every dollar that he's worth, in terms of what he's capable of demanding. Hopefully, as Brian said, you can come to terms on something that's a little bit more favorable to the Sixers, a little bit shorter term deal, but you're in that window where you need to go for it, particularly when there's some unanswered questions. Is this thing going to work out in Boston with Porzingis? Milwaukee has some questions about Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton. So those are the top 2 teams in the East. They've got some question marks going into the season. So if you're Philly, you're still in that window. Top 3 in the East, I believe. You're going to go ahead and make this offer. And yes, you do want James Harden back. But if for whatever reason he were to walk, I'm just saying you're in good hands going forward because you've got Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey has so much more that he hasn't shown us once the ball is finally in his hands more. So I think it's not the end of the world if Harden were not to be there, but you're so close with a guy of this talent, you can't replicate that anywhere else.
Yeah.
You got to hope that he comes back.
Well, and speaking of good hands, we also have Kendrick Perkins here with us. So, Perk, do the 76ers need Harden, and should they keep him?
They don't need him, but I would bring him back in a limited role. Now, here's the thing, right? If James Harden had a problem with the system that Doc Rivers was running, what makes you think he's going to change with Nick Nurse?
Exactly.
Last year, I thought he did an excellent job in the regular season for his transitioning over to the point guard position because, the way he was setting the table up for Joel Embiid, in the pick and roll, whether that was Embiid diving to the basket or that 15-footer from the elbow jumper, I thought the chemistry was there. But it just goes to show you that you never know what James Harden is thinking, and can you trust him? Can you trust him to be all the way in? So when I go back to that Game 7 and I can't get it out of my mind against the Boston Celtics, he quit. He literally rolled over like a yoga mat and quit. And so that's the concern for me. But the major concern out of everything is, can you get James Harden to come back and buy into a limited role so he don't stunt the growth of Tyrese Maxey. James Harden is going to have to play off the ball. You're going to have to continue to let the young man in Tyrese Maxey grow and continue to develop into the young promising star that he has shown us over the past 2 seasons. But I bring James Harden back, yes, in a limited role, still a starter, but he has to get off the damn basketball.
Well, to your point, Kendrick, that's why I would not bring James Harden back, Tim, and Wendy, and Kendrick, and Victoria, because there's a certain guy out there that are going to elevate guys a lot better than James Harden that's on the market and will be a lot cheaper and a lot younger. And that guy's Fred VanVleet, who Nick Nurse knows is the new head coach of Philadelphia 76ers. We know he can play in the pick and roll. We know he can knock down shots. And he also has something that James Harden doesn't have, a championship ring on his finger, that he was a big part of when Kawhi Leonard and Pascal Siakam and all those guys won in Toronto before Kawhi Leonard went to the Los Angeles Clippers. That's why I would go after a guy that's a cheaper and a better option in terms of a fit. He's not a better player than James Harden. That's not new news here. But we're all not new to this, so let's bring some truth to this. At a certain point, you need a guy that can orchestrate things. You need a guy that can be more of an adult in the room. I go back to what Doc Rivers said about the challenges when it comes to James Harden. It was challenging coaching a player like that who's going to revert back to who he is no matter what the numbers and what the scene of the game tells him. He said that was a challenge. Now you got a guy, Nick Nurse, who does not suffer fools gladly. Wendy, you know this. Tim, you know this. And Perk, you know this. If James is not doing what he knows is not going to work according to the specifications of Nick Nurse, then you got this kind of situation in the Philadelphia 76ers, and you're paying that guy an exorbitant amount of money to be that guy. He's not going to want to be a second fiddle. He believes he should be the main fiddle. That may not be the kind of fit you need for Philadelphia James Harden going forward to get out of the second round and be an NBA championship contender. I would go to Fred VanVleet and leave James Harden alone.
What are Kyrie's options for teams at this point where he might call home?
That's the issue. Same as Harden. There's not a market. The teams that have cap space, we're talking about San Antonio, Orlando, Indiana, Detroit. Those are not Kyrie Irving teams.
No.
2 of the teams that have cap space this summer are so sort of lukewarm about this free agent market, they've already spent it. The Jazz picked up John Collins. That was basically a free agent signing. And the Thunder took on Davis Bertans to move up a couple of spots in the draft. They used most of their space on that. He doesn't have a market. It's not that nobody wants him. It's just that the teams that have the space aren't in the zone to go get Kyrie Irving. You don't start a new franchise with Victor Wembanyama and sign Kyrie Irving. It doesn't match. So he can take meetings if he'd like, and he probably didn't envision this being his unrestricted free agency when last summer he asked, was trying to get a deal with the Nets and asked for a trade and then asked again. But that's what we have. And again, the Mavericks can't replace him. So we have an imperfect fit. It's not ideal, but to me, the real drama comes down to what's the contract. What are they going to negotiate with him? How many years? Are they going to go to the max? I would go to the max, but I wouldn't go to the 5 years. I would stay away from that. So they're both Harden and Kyrie and the Mavericks and the 76ers are all kind of in the same spot. They really aren't in position to break up. So the best thing is to stay together.
Perk, what about you?
Wendy, I think the Mavs don't have a choice and don't have any leverage but to give Kyrie Irving what he wants. If you think about what they did over the past 2 seasons, losing Jalen Brunson to the New York Knicks and then starting the season off last season the way that they started, not good. Luka not really being in shape, to be honest, and all of a sudden you go out and you get Kyrie Irving, and in the Dallas Maverick uniform, Kyrie Irving held up his end of the bargain. Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks failed him. So you cannot afford to let another box office or superstar caliber player walk out of that franchise because, again, you have to continue to please your superstars. And I don't know what the market will be in the near future, but I know you won't have too many guys of Kyrie Irving caliber to bring into Dallas. So I feel like Kyrie actually has all the leverage when it comes down to the Mavericks. And if I'm Kyrie Irving, they have to seriously convince me in that office or in that meeting before I sign this contract why I should take less.
Perk, it's interesting you say about Kyrie held up his end of the bargain, because that's the one part of the narrative that's been lost with this whole trying to make this work with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, because anything that went wrong last year with Dallas, we know what people said. Well, Kyrie Irving was the reason why it didn't work. It wasn't just him that it didn't work. And we can use the whole leeway, runway, didn't have enough of that. But that's the one thing, based on leverage, what you just said, that Kyrie kind of has. Not kind of, he does have, with the Dallas Mavericks. Because the Dallas Mavericks put all those chips in the middle of the table with Kyrie Irving's name in the middle of it. The last thing you want is for him to go make $50 million plus per year with somebody else. And it doesn't matter if he takes meetings. Wendy, I love what you had to say. Kyrie's going to take meetings. He wants to eat and dine on somebody else's dime. That's what this comes down to. He wants to be celebrated. He wants to be wined and dined. He wants people to look at him and say, Kyrie, we love you. We want you here. We need you here. Don't worry about the past history. If you come here with us, everything's going to be fine. He knows how to play that landscape. Yeah. But based on his past history, it's going to be very interesting that he can take all the meetings he wants. But the only place that can really pay him the kind of money, give him what he wants, is a team that has the most to be invested when it comes to Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, what about you, Legs?
I look at it like this. You look at Kyrie Irving, it's kind of what I said a little while ago about Harden, right? Getting the guy in-house is harder.
Yeah.
That's what they did. Now, go back to when Kyrie and Kevin Durant wanted out of Brooklyn. At the time, we kind of quickly identified Phoenix as a spot for Kevin Durant. That's where he wanted to be. And then Lakers were coming up for Kyrie, right? And you heard it even as the season wound down in Dallas and they opted really to just quit on the end of the year and be out of the playoffs altogether. You still heard about the Lakers. And I said at the time, actually, that's the one team that probably makes sense because he enjoyed that lane next to LeBron James. He thrived in that lane next to LeBron James. He rode sidecar with LeBron James, right? Helming that motorcycle. And he was great in that role. Problem is this, and Wendy's alluded to it. Like the Lakers aren't going in that direction. They didn't clear up the cap space. You listen to Rob Pelinka's comments the other day. He's talking about running it back, and he's talking about adding, quote, the type of guys that Darvin Ham wants to coach. What does that mean? That means grinders. That means workers. That means hard-nosed defenders. Guys that are about, all about team first. Didn't sound like he was describing necessarily that situation. It sounds like that's not going to happen. So barring that, Dallas is his best spot for Kyrie Irving because it's the best combination of financial security that he's looking for, clearly, and competitive environment. You still are playing with a superstar, and they need more time together to gel offensively. They've got to work their roster around those two guys with a bunch of defenders, right? And that's what that team needs because they're very porous on the perimeter defensively. But that's the best spot now for Kyrie to have the balance of money and a competitive environment to give you a chance because, like Wendy said, the teams that have the money are not destinations that Kyrie Irving is going to be interested in.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.